Hello, everybody. Will here. Obviously, as we begin this week, much of the country's and world's attention has been focused on Upper Manhattan and Columbia University. And I've been pulling my hair out, seeing the ongoing protests and arrests covered in the media. So I thought for my own sanity, I would talk to one of the Columbia students currently at Columbia, currently camped out and occupying the campus for Palestine. So I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Basil Zacharia Rodriguez, a student organizer at Quad and the Palestinian Students Union. Basil, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Basil, I can see from my camera here. Are you currently in the Quad at Columbia right now?
Yes, so we are on the West Lawn right now at the Gaza Solidarity Encampment. And I think you brought up a really great point that a lot of the attention has been on Upper Manhattan, when in fact all our organizers and protesters here are here solely for the reason of the ongoing genocide in Gaza and in Palestine. So we really want to shift attention away from Upper Manhattan and towards Palestine, towards the liberation struggle that is ongoing, and towards stopping the ongoing genocide, which has killed over 40,000 Palestinians in the past 7 months alone.
I mean, Basil, I said, I've been pulling my hair out watching the media coverage of this because now the Upper West Side of Manhattan is now apparently the most violent and dangerous place on earth. As I'm seeing, 3 or 4 columns down, news about mass graves being uncovered outside every hospital in Gaza right now. So, yeah, thank you for clarifying this. But I guess I just want to get started. Could you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got involved in the divestment campaign at Columbia?
Yeah, so my name is Basil, and I'm a Palestinian Chicanx person who grew up in California and in Mexico, in Baja California. I got involved in organizing for Palestine generationally. I come from generations of Palestinians who have been organizing for the liberation of Palestine and the Palestinian people and for our full freedom and human rights. And I would say that my personal organizing has been escalating specifically since 2021, which is when my aunt, who was a Palestinian journalist, her name was Shireen Abu Akleh, was brutally executed by the Israeli army while she was doing her job reporting on encroaching settler colonialism in Jenin.
So did you say Shireen Abu Akleh was your aunt?
Yes, my mother's cousin.
Oh, wow. Okay, Jesus. I'm really sorry about your loss. I mean, I think that was a sort of an eye-opening moment that happened a couple months before October 7th. The full-on assassination of a U.S. citizen and journalist in the occupied West Bank. Obviously, people's attention are focused on Columbia right now and the actions of the Columbia administration in calling the NYPD in to disperse these encampments on the Columbia campus. As best you can describe it, what has the last week or so been like for you and your fellow organizers and activists at Columbia University?
So I would say that the past week has been a whirlwind for all our student organizers and student protesters. The Gaza Solidarity Encampment popped up on Wednesday, and we had been organizing a series of teach-ins, of speakers, and actions all focused on ending Columbia University's complicity and financial profit from the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So it's been eye-opening to see how strongly the university is attached to maintaining the status quo of war profiteering from the genocide of our people. It has been like nothing else we've ever seen before. The mass arrest of over hundreds of student protesters who were peacefully protesting, even according to the fascist NYPD. So even according to the most fascist entity, it was Columbia that misstepped in arresting mass peaceful protesters. So it really just shows us how truly complicit they are in financially profiting millions of dollars off of the mass murder of the Palestinian people. And this is a fundamental heartbreak and dehumanizing campaign that they are involved in.
I'll ask you a question that I sort of addressed rhetorically on the episode we recorded yesterday, of which your interview will be featured in. The last time the NYPD was called in to disperse student encampments and protests was in 1968 during the Vietnam War, and there was like the Columbia Liberated Zone. And I've seen like a banner, sort of repurposed in 2024. But I'm wondering, like, as a student at Columbia, how much like that experience in 1968 of that student anti-war activism has been glorified or at least canonized as part of Columbia's history, and what do you think accounts for the administrators who pride themselves on like Columbia's history of anti-war activism calling in the NYPD again? And because like in 1968 that was considered a disaster for Columbia and something that like that it shamed them, and that like that they've since like I don't know, they've now sort of, like I said, sanctified the student activism of the 60s and 70s, and now are treating you and your fellow students like criminals and terrorists because of your anti-war activism. What do you think accounts for this disparity between like I said, the sanctifying of anti-Vietnam War protests and the criminalization and demonization, the anti-war protests that are going on now?
I mean, I think it's incredibly telling. A capitalist institution, an imperialist institution that will never be on the side of the people until we pressure them, until we force their hand. And once any semblance of divestment or liberation or victory for the liberation movement is reached, we know in the future they will co-opt our movement and they will say, we were here the whole time. We were advocating for social justice the whole time. But it is telling because Columbia has these supposed ethics, these written out values of community safety, of inclusivity, while they are opening a university campus in occupied Palestine, in Tel Aviv, which Palestinian students will not be able to access by the nature of the apartheid state. So in that way, Columbia is inherently contradictory to their own supposed values of inclusivity and of desegregation, ultimately. So I think that it's really interesting. There are classes on this campus about the 1968 protests. And meanwhile, they are, once again falling into the same normalized routine of state violence against student protesters. I think it also really brings up the conversation of how Palestine is and will always be the exception, because Palestine represents an indigenous struggle that fundamentally destabilizes the legitimacy of settler colonial states. And by that nature, even while glorifying the 1968 protests, the anti-war protests, they will continue to shut us down and try to repress us, try to silence us, because they are making financial gain off of the genocide.
Now, what is the current status of your fellow students who have been either arrested or suspended? Can you give us any update on the status of their enrollment, or I assume they're out on bail now or have been released? What is the ongoing status of these suspensions and arrests at the Columbia campus?
Yeah, so they have all been released, thankfully, but the arrests are ongoing across New York against student protesters, and our own students are still traumatized. They are still healing from the brutality that Columbia has enforced on them and the NYPD has enforced on them. People's shoulders were dislocated, people's fingers were fractured, people were severely injured, both physically and psychologically. And so there is a great deal of healing and reparations to continue to happen, that needs to happen. As for the school side of things, people are sort of in limbo. There have been mass suspensions happening. People have been forcibly evicted from their homes with no prior notice. And so they weren't able to access any of their belongings that they need to live day to day. Their IDs were deactivated, meaning they cannot access the campus that they pay tuition money to. So it's just these levels of repression are just, as you said, unprecedented since the 60s and truly damning. And we see right through their attempts to silence us for the complicit war profiteers that they are.
Well, I mean, their attempts to silence you. I mean, not to be giving free advice to the Columbia University administration or anything, but their attempts to silence these protests or clear it out or arrest you have not only backfired on Columbia's campus, but have now spread to NYU, Yale, University of Michigan, at like elite institutions all over the country. What you've started at Columbia, like these encampments are cropping up everywhere now. So, I mean, have you been in contact with any student organizers at NYU? Their encampment was just there were mass arrests at NYU last night, but like just in terms of like how badly the administration's attempt to quash peaceful protests and peaceful political anti-war protests on an American university. Could you give a sense of just how badly this has backfired for them?
This is disgusting. It is so inhumane to expose their very own students to the levels of state violence which they have in the past week. And the student movement has been mobilized and has escalated in a way that really shows that the students are appalled at our own universities, which are meant to be places of education, in their financial and their material and psychological investment in the colonization of Palestine. And I think it also really speaks to the nature of American schooling and the history of American educational institutions, which are to ultimately legitimize the settler colonial state of the US and to rationalize the dehumanization and the white supremacy, which are written into the US's legal system.
We began this conversation talking about how like the eyes of America are focused on Upper Manhattan and not Palestine and Gaza right now. But I'm interested, like so much of the media coverage of these protests have been this like wholly invented out of thin air. The accusations of quote horrific anti-Semitism. How do you as a movement like exercise that kind of message discipline to the natural human instinct to want to defend yourself from these sort of outrageous calumnies of like you and many of your fellow like Jewish students and activists that you're violently anti-Semitic? Like, how do you balance a need to like to want to respond to like I said, outrageous slanders like that, and like as you said in the beginning of this conversation, desperately trying to keep it focused that no, this is about the ongoing genocide of people in Gaza?
I think that that's exactly what we just have to do is, we don't have to internalize anything that is said about us that is untrue. This is a movement for liberation, for life. It's a movement to stop genocide, which has killed more than 40,000 Palestinians just in the Gaza Strip over the last 7 months. As these, slanderous reports are coming out focused on Upper Manhattan, we've been hearing heartbreaking, truly heartbreaking reports coming out of the Nasser hospital in Gaza, where I want to say more than 200 people were found whose bodies were so inhumanely disposed of as though they weren't human, and their organs were robbed. Their skin was robbed, stolen for Israel's skin bank, which is the largest skin bank in the world. This level of dehumanizing in this year is unacceptable. So we will not be silenced with slander. We will not let our voices be sidelined to slander, and we will continue to seek Palestine as our compass for liberation and look towards the Palestinian people who have been telling us what they have endured for years and years and years and generations upon generations. So we're just going to say enough is enough. We're not going to respond to slander. We're just going to stay focused on our messaging, and people will listen to us.
I mean, it's an object lesson in what the U.S. state media considers violence or aggression, and I think they've all decided that violence and aggression is found by protests at a college campus and not mass murder being funded by the U.S. government. But I want to take that as a jumping off point, as Basil, as someone who has sort of a family connection to Palestine and like has sort of come up in this struggle for or in like activism on behalf of Palestine, which was like for years, like, you know, shouting into the darkness in this country. It felt like, but like I also said on the same episode that I feel like these arrests and like how heavy-handed and counter and really like even damaging to their own institutions these arrests have been, they're doing it to avoid losing an argument. Because I feel like last year, you know, if you had said Israel is a violent apartheid state, there would be a ton of arguments that people could muster to be like, oh no, it's not really like that, it's not so simple, you're simply misinformed, or that's anti-Semitic or whatever. But over the last 6 months, I just doesn't seem to me like there are many arguments left to deny what's going on. And like I just really feel like that is like there's no more argument to be had, so the arrests start happening.
Yeah, I think that is an accurate analysis. I think that the truth of what is happening in Palestine has never been more clear, has never been so undeniable. And for the school to not even engage with us and to just jump to arresting a protest that, again, even the most disgusting entity of the NYPD said was a peaceful protest, and had no threat to anyone, for them to arrest and brutalize students, their own students, who are enraged and heartbroken at all of our own inherent complicity, not only as citizens of the U.S., but also as students at Columbia University, in making the 1% even more money off of genocide. It just shows their true colors, in a way that is, again, undeniable.
I guess my next question would be, obviously the actions of the Columbia University administration are one thing, but how do you assess the actions, support, or lack thereof, depending on, you know, who you ask? How do you assess how Columbia's faculty, how the your professors, how have they responded to the actions of the administration?
Yeah, I think there's been a mix of responses. I think that people have to sort of come to terms with their own positionality in the movement and come to terms with their own complicity in the movement. But a lot of professors have stood by us. Professors at NYU were even arrested for putting their bodies on the line to physically protect students. So there are professors here with us in the encampment. There are professors, on our de-escalation team, ready to, try to de-escalate potential white supremacists who try to come through and attack people, which has been happening in the past week. But there are also professors who I think are comfortable in their salaried position and who don't want to risk anything. And I think that what happened on last Wednesday has opened people's eyes up a bit to the fact that no one is safe on this campus. And that is because of the fact that this campus is a battleground which makes profit from weapons that are used to kill our own students' family members. And as professors, they are legitimizing that as an institutional right, which it is fundamentally not. It is not a right for any school to also be making money off of weapons and off of genocide, especially of the Palestinian people who are students, are professors at this institution. So I think there's a mix of professors who are, standing with us physically, professors who are really helping us, all hands in. Then there are professors who are, they kind of agree with us. They agree people should have free speech, but they aren't really standing with us in the way we need them to. And then there are professors who are outright attacking people. So there's attacking protesters, attacking Palestinians is what I mean. So there's a big range.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the money involved here, and I think something to keep in mind about an institution like Columbia or NYU specifically is that Columbia and NYU are, in addition to being, you know, world class universities, they're also the single largest landowners in the city of New York. I mean, they have
Yep.
real estate holdings that are unimaginable in the island of Manhattan, and they have endowments like in the billions and billions of dollars. So, like, how does this money play into their like their special relationship with Israel, and particularly very well-heeled donors like Robert Kraft, for instance, who's now saying, "Hey, I'm cutting off the spigot to Colombia if they don't, get rid of these anti-Israel protesters. It's just like, but I mean, like, does Colombia really need all that fucking money? Like, I mean, they could sell one building and probably pay for the loss of Robert Kraft's donations.
Right. This is a crucial point that we cannot miss because Columbia University is the largest landowner in New York City. And, you know, as I said earlier, Palestine is a struggle that connects to everywhere. It's an indigenous sovereignty struggle. So if we think about our own indigenous people here, as well as native Harlemites here, native people who grew up in Harlem, there is mass level of settler colonialism in the form of gentrification happening because of Columbia University. Um, they have plans to expand from 116th all the way to 180 to 180th Street. They want to make all of that Columbia University. So if you think about the homes that would be destroyed and bulldozed over, if you think about the people who would be kicked out, the families who have grown up there their whole lives, this is very, very parallel to what they're doing in Palestine, where they want to build a Columbia campus in Palestine, bulldozing over generations of Palestinians who have been there their whole life. So these struggles are interconnected, and as student organizers, we are specifically calling for the end of Columbia University's settler colonialism in Palestine and their settler colonialism in Harlem and in New York. Another aspect is there is a donor, I believe his name is Jonathan Levine, who has made his support of the building of the Manhattanville campus, which is a newer campus that they're trying to build, which will be displacing so many people from Harlem. This campus is contingent on the building of the Tel Aviv campus of Columbia University. So in this way, the two struggles are inherently intertwined, and people are making their financial support dependent on both the expulsion of people from Harlem, Black and brown people predominantly, and of Palestinians from Palestine. So it is, yeah, it's
I mean,
disgusting.
the point that you made originally about how, like, this sort of satellite Tel Aviv University campus is one in which Palestinian American students would not be allowed to attend even if had been admitted to Columbia University, I think is a very telling one. Basil, before we let you go here, we got to wrap it up. But it seems like these protests are going to continue through the end of the school year. Just, I mean, what can you tell our listeners about, like, where you and the various student groups, like Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace, all of the, like, sort of coordinated activism going on the campus right now? What are your plans, like, going through to the end of the school year and then beyond?
Yeah, so we are students. As much as Columbia University wants to ostracize us from campus, wants to revoke our ID, access to the school, we are here, and we are enraged at the school's complicity in murdering over 40,000 Palestinians. So we do not plan on leaving. We do not plan on being silent until the school divests from all forms of Israeli settler colonialism, genocide, and apartheid, until the school has full financial transparency, because we are at a point when even administrators themselves, even people in the investments office, do not even know what Columbia is invested in. And the bits that we have gleaned, the fact that they're invested in General Electric, in Microsoft, in Boeing, and that we have a board of trustees member on the board of directors at Lockheed Martin. These are weapons companies. These are surveillance companies. This is imperialism and settler colonialism at its finest. We also demand amnesty for all the student protesters. We also demand that Columbia cease their expansion efforts in Harlem and start giving actual community members a say in what is happening to their land. And we are stronger than we have ever been. We are more organized than we have ever been, and we are more educated than we have ever been. So we do not plan on leaving. We plan on holding our ground and being steadfast, just as the Palestinian people in Gaza and across Palestine have been for generations. We will be steadfast and we will be victorious, and we will not stop our protesting until liberation is here.
Well, there you go. Columbia University administrators, if you're listening, hey, if you want kids to go back to class, just simply just simply take your money out of the worst country on the face of the planet right now. Not that hard. Basil, I want to thank you for your time, and I just wish you the best of luck ongoing in this protest movement that has really captured the attention of the country, and I hope will redirect that attention to where it should be, which is not college campuses. It is Palestine.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.